Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning.
Welcome to Deep Dive Film School.
This week we begin our Disabilities Documented Festival with 2020's Crip Camp, A Disability Revolution.
Let's dive on in. All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Pulcher.
And if you like what you see /hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that people do what, Pulcher?
Find good media.
That's right.
That's not bad media.
No,
Don't go to those
good
places.
media. Not yes. I mean, you could probably find a lot of bad media on YouTube. In fact, you can. That's how some people get radicalized. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about our brand new festival. This is Disabilities Documented. This was your idea. Do you want to talk just right out of the gates a little bit about what the next 4 movies are going to be doing here?
Yeah, for sure. I think we're going to be covering a lot of ground of different types of disabilities, from autism to, physical disabilities. I think this movie is a great one to start with because it really frames the whole revolution and the idea of equal rights around people with disabilities. There'll be some social documentary stuff in here, no doubt, but hopefully we cover a lot of bases and really expose some things that people aren't normally used to, I think, seeing. All of these have an inspiring impact to them as well, but I also think it's a very important cause to look at and cover and be moved by, and all of these documentaries are going to do that to us.
Well, and you think about just the way in which the documentary format can obviously the documentary format can live as 100 million different things, but the most of the ways that we see it, the ubiquitous ways that we see documentaries, is either as really someone talking either in our ear or to us about here's the way it was, right? Like that tends to be one way that we see documentaries. And then another way is very much a fly on the wall. And I think that when you're looking at members of different disabled communities, so often your average person tends to be very uncomfortable around people with disabilities, whether that be a physical disability of someone in a wheelchair or someone that has a prosthetic or something of that nature, and being like, I don't know, shirking away because they're like, well, that's not like me, or I don't know really what. I mean, there's definitely a lot of reasons why people do that.
I think you're kind of scared of what you don't understand in
a
way, right?
And you don't know how you're supposed to react. And
I think your inherent bias probably comes up to a degree, and you don't know how to react to someone who's different, even though they're just like you, and maybe they have different life experiences. And I think we get a lot of those inside of this Crip Camp documentary here.
Well, and don't you think and I thought about this in particular, it comes up throughout the festival, but in particular with Crip Camp, documentaries, unlike a lot of other films, if you're going to watch a documentary, you understand that certain elements of it are going to take time. So you start with part of your asset bag as you walk into a documentary is, I need to be patient, because some of this might require patience, which if you're going to watch an action movie or a romantic comedy or something like that, you might be walking in going, I don't get it, right? And it's like a documentary by its merits, the people that are there to watch a documentary are like, okay, I'm here to observe, I'm here to pay attention. And so in a movie like this, where we have some people, some people with cerebral palsy who have profound speech impediments, the documentary leans into your ability to be like, we are here to listen to these people. And thank God we do, because they have some of the most incredible stuff to say. And I
and they're
love,
hilarious.
and just hilarious and
Yeah.
insightful and important insights into not just their condition, but the condition of the world that these people are living in.
For sure. And something I've learned over the years, especially with documentaries, there's the different types that you're talking about with the fly on the wall versus kind of your basic, straightforward talking heads type of documentary. And that's definitely what this is, talking heads, old footage, pretty typical social revolution documentary. There's dozens of these out here about a variety of different movements or whatever it may be. And something I've learned though over the years is you do have to have that patience, because a lot of times you're like, okay, I get it, I get what that is, or I know what they're trying to do here, but always there ends up being some kind of twist. You're like, oh, that's why they made this, right?
Always. And even if it starts from a place where you're like, oh, the main subject here is very charming or very funny or
Jim.
very interesting,
Yeah.
you go, oh, okay, I get this. But then you have to stop yourself and be like, I'm 20 minutes in. Like, they've already shown me some gold. 20 minutes in, they've shown me some gold. So this has got to be headed somewhere. And here, I mean, with Crip Camp, we meet right out of the gates. We meet Jim Lebrecht, and
he's the director.
And he isn't he also, or no, he's the director. Who's our very first? I thought he was our first cast.
Yeah, that's Jim. He's got spina bifida.
Oh, that is also our director. Oh my God,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
the
think I
director.
realized that was also
you didn't.
the director.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
no, he did
Okay.
that. He's worked in Hollywood as a sound engineer for
Totally.
decades.
I didn't
and
realize he directed this. Oh my God, that's so great. Oh wow.
Yeah,
okay.
no, yeah, he totally did. Ed, do you know what he was a sound engineer on?
What?
Your favorite movie, Battlefield Earth.
Are you
there you
kidding
go.
me?
No, I'm not. Look it up. James Lebrecht.
You just blew my mind.
Yep.
I
he
wish
was
there
a
would have
sound
been
engineer.
footage of him with a gigantic 10-foot tall dreadlocks.
Just like hanging out with John Travolta.
Oh my God.
Yeah, awesome, huh?
Or like, nose ring Barry Pepper. Jesus, I had no idea. That's amazing. Okay, so I didn't realize that. The man is like shoulder to shoulder with stardom. But
for sure.
But we
He's a
also meet
charming
him,
guy,
and he just as a character is such an amazing character. You see him as the old hippie, which is great. But then you see him as like the long-haired surfer dude guy in a wheelchair, and you're like, oh my God, like as a 15-year-old, like, okay, whatever, he has spinal bifida and he's a wheelchair. Dude's a knockout. He's got that long, like, floppy hair. And he's like good looking, like, funny kid.
He's awesome. He's a very charming guy. And really, it was his idea to try and create this movie with his longtime partner. I believe her name's Carolyn, and she helped co-direct this movie with him.
Wow,
And
I
it's
had no idea that he was the director. I mean, he is kind of our beginning entry into this world, and some of the
this world of this summer camp, right?
Well, and even before the summer camp, some of his early moments of dialogue of like his dad telling him, "You're gonna have to be so outgoing just if you want to make it." And the way he describes, he says, "I wanted to be a part of the world, but I didn't see anybody like me in it." Right, and then he goes to this camp, and you talked earlier about like these kind of social documentaries, and that we see lots of them. I'll tell you one thing we don't see a lot of is this much archival footage. Holy God.
Again, that's the
so much archival footage.
For sure. And that's the reason this got made, right? That's one of the reasons. And I think Jim is behind the camera. Jim is behind the camera for a lot of these, but it seems like they passed it around. And you're the main meat of this movie is in the 1970s. There's this summer camp with disabled people. It evolves into kind of a group of people who begin this revolution to get disabled people the rights they deserve. Right.
And in the beginning,
and when
oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah. And when you kind of start first watching this and you see the amount of disabled people all in one place, and there's some severely disabled people, to your point earlier there. Jim has spina bifida, but even he had to get used to the amount of disabled people that were around in this camp. And this was kind of their Woodstock, right? And they do all the cliched camp things that you can think of, making out in the back room, do it, there's a spread of crabs at one point.
I love it. And then it's just like, it feels super normal that it's like, oh yeah, like we got crabs. But one of the things I was going to say is that really so much of this footage goes down to two things. One is definitely Jim, but the other is this hippy dippy group, the People's Video Theater, man, are the ones that are just like these like long-haired dudes who like show up in their van to document the Camp Jened, right?
Camp Jened, yeah. I was gonna say, let's mention the name of the camp.
And
Jened
I love that, like, Joe, this camp counselor, is not some revolutionary. He's just like a pot-bellied, like 20-something-year-old hippie who like had the land, started out doing a regular camp, and was like, you know who needs a camp? Crippled kids. And then like did it. And then it became, I could not help, but I'm sure this occurred to you, much like when we did Shirt Turn 12. But for me, for the work that I do, working with young people, empowering young people to find their voice and tell their stories at the nonprofit I've worked at for a dozen years, seeing this, like, what by its kind of ubiquitous start is so simple, which is, let's get kids together who are handicapped to be around other kids who are like that so they don't feel weird.
Yeah.
Super simple. Your whole mission statement could be on a napkin, right? And yet, when it happens, all of these kids are like, I was the only person like me in a wheelchair, and now I was surrounded by other kids like that. And there comes this point, it's about half an hour into it, where they're all sitting around this picnic table talking about their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And all of them, even the kids who have profound vocal disabilities, are able to put an actual voice to what their experiences are like, and all of them resonate with each other. And they are speaking so eloquently. I mean, in this like chills, like this brilliantly profound way, where I was like, oh my God, man. Like, if it had been a short, if it hadn't even gotten to the ADA, if it hadn't even gotten to the sit-in, if it had just been a short, where the short ended with these group of teenagers in the 70s sitting around this picnic table talking and connecting, that would have been worth my time. The fact that it goes to all the places it does is just like even more mind-bending.
All the camp footage is amazing. And the questions they're asking are things that they've never been asked before, right?
Yeah.
And so there's some kind of freedom, obviously this is a lot about the people and the music and stuff, but these are people who are being told by adults that they can't go to school because they're going to be a fire hazard to the other people, to the other students in class. Like, fuck that.
And that's the only world they know. And I mean, oh my God, this movie is so punk, and it is so hippie, and it is so, oh my God, like I just like over and over and over again, I kept like pumping my fists in the air, like that is that is so badass. Like,
absolutely.
Because they really they lock into the civil rights movement and are like, we will, and even that one, they
have a black counselor that's there, and he sees similar struggles of the segregation that he feels as a black man in the 70s.
Lionel, he is completely.
I sat right in front. I sat right behind that guy at the Sundance premiere.
Oh my God, I know. The whole time I was watching this, I was thinking, Poulter was there. He like got to see all of these people.
And I have a great story that I hope everyone sticks around for at the end to prove that these people are still struggling today.
Totally.
Of an example of what happened. So I'll get into that in a little bit. But, I just love that they're able to, that question about their parents, I think it was really eye-opening because a lot of their parents are very overprotective and afraid, like everyone else, of what they don't know, right? And they're they're describing how they keep pointing out my handicap and it makes me feel worse.
Yeah.
But you don't think about that when you look at a disabled people, and like you think about all the other people that don't know them that may make a snide comment or some shitty comment, but you never think about their parents. And even their parents aren't doing anything out of hate. It's really out of ignorance.
Well, and there's this moment, this incredibly powerful moment where they're talking about, and Nancy, who is the one young woman with cerebral palsy, who is, and again,
she's the best. She is the best.
I am guilty of this too. Her vocalizations are so difficult for almost anybody to even understand what it is that she's saying. But she's talking, and again, like to me as an outsider, I'm like, she's making noises. I mean, I may be rude, but like that's what it seemed like to me. But the person that has the microphone has it right to her, and when she gets done, Steve, who is another guy who has cerebral palsy, who Steve is like my hero in this thing. He is like the most punk dude on the planet. I love this guy. And we'll talk about him later. But he says, I think what Nancy's saying, if I got it right, is that kids don't, like, normal kids have the freedom to be alone and be lonely. And we are never alone, and we never get to be lonely. And he says, and I mean, even for him to suss that out, because he has his own speech impediments, takes a while, but we get the subtitles. And he goes, Nancy, did I get that right? And she goes, yep. And you just go, oh my God, like she probably, outside of her own parents, has not been able to just have people sit and shut the fuck up and listen to her.
And that's the big thing is people are actually listening. The fact that she looks over and the guy's holding that mic from her, she's never had anyone holding a mic to have her have any kind of voice whatsoever, and it kind of shocks her and shakes her up a little bit, like, oh, you're actually listening to me?
It's so spellbinding for us, for that to be on film, and for me to get to be able to watch that. Like, oh my God.
I agree.
It's so powerful, dude.
It's quite the powerful, and I think we're going to get a lot of these moments through this documentary festival here. But to your point of that, these people, the right of their privacy gets taken away, and you don't really think about that, right? And they're basically just saying, I just want people not to have to change my diaper. Like, that's embarrassing for
Which
me,
is what
especially
Jim
in
talks
an older
about,
age.
right? He's like, I'm 15. He's like, and he says it. He says it to you as the audience member. Imagine being 15 and already feeling awkward, and literally you've stopped wearing diapers like a couple months ago. And he's like, but when we were at camp, he's like, everybody had something weird with their bodies. Maybe not the same thing, but everybody had something going on, right? And I just thought to myself, like, my God, like, it would still be uncomfortable, but it would be so freeing to be like, yeah, here's my weird thing, right? Like, that's got to make everybody feel so much more normal.
No doubt. And then, when they leave this camp, it feels like they're going back in time, right? And it was a very empowering time for them. Now, I can't believe we've gotten, this far into this and not talked about Judy Heumann yet.
Oh,
she's
my
a revolutionary.
But it introduces,
even from the
movie introduces her to us in the most nominal way. Like, it does not start off as like, here's Judy Heumann.
The main focus.
Like, she is a force of fucking nature.
First off, her last name is Heumann. Like, come on, like, how perfect is that?
Yeah. But in the beginning, we just hear her being like, okay, do we want lasagna on Mondays? Like, that's she's the one who's in control. She's very inclusive and outspoken, but just like a born leader, right? She's adorable. She's the best.
Someone said something to her and asked her if she was sick or something like that, because she has polio, and polios are the normal ones. So the polio's on top and cerebral palsy on the bottom.
Dude, that hierarchy conversation, which I believe, what is her name? Denise. It's Denise, I believe, who is the one. Yeah, Denise is the one who ends up becoming the sex therapist later on. But we get interviews with her now. She's in her sort of 70s. She has purple hair. But, like, she's amazing. But like, yeah, she talks about this like, yeah, there's a hierarchy. Like if you had polio, you're still like kind of normal. And if you have CP, like you're like the bottom of the barrel. And then she tells that story about like when she found her husband, who she had originally known at Crip camp, but then like met him again years later, that her mom was like, couldn't you find a polio?
I get why you want to marry someone with a disability.
Oh
but
my
couldn't you
God. And you just go like you can't help but be like, it never ends. Like on any level, there's always a pecking order of like, couldn't you find?
So funny. But out of this camp and this experience of all of these people relating and get together and having a voice together, Judy creates DIA, which is disabled enacted or in action.
Disability in action. Yeah.
And that's the movement she starts, and she's speaking out for disabled people, and we get this like Geraldo Rivera inside Willowbrook.
Oh my God.
Awful shit. Like you're seeing the inside of these people just laying in their own feces, just
and
barely
that was within our
eating with their
lifetime, dude. Like
I
that's
know,
what's
it's wild.
crazy is that this isn't the 1800s, right? Like this is the 1970s. This is like when you
Geraldo
and I
looked
were
pretty
born.
disgusted. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, but he always does. He could look disgusted about anything. It's just a default setting that he has in his face.
But they're giving 3 minutes per child to eat or something insane like that. Just obviously
kids covered in their own feces, like
inhumane conditions. So it really gets that the disabled rights. It gives that a little bit of a voice, because if Geraldo's talking about it, it means it's on the news. People are seeing it in 60 Minutes, whatever it is, starts giving them a voice, and then they attach themselves to the civil rights movement, allowing them to speak to their discrimination, and basically arguing that, hey, federal money can't discriminate, right? Nixon vetoes the bill initially. They keep fighting. There's a protest in Manhattan.
Well,
demonstrations.
and they have a handful of kind of kismet moments in their movement, and the first one is really the disabled vets coming back from the Vietnam War. Like that coincides right with Judy's movement at this demonstration in front of Nixon's office, which is just like, you go, well, yeah, and it's really interesting. There's this side story of this reporter from, I think she's from Miss Magazine. Is that right? Or what?
I'm not sure which reporter you're talking about. There's the one guy, Evan White, who's like the
not
only
him,
journalist.
the woman who, she was like, I didn't know anything about disabled people, and then I got hit by a car. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think she might be from Miss Magazine. I can't remember what magazine she's from. But
Yeah,
basically,
okay, I know who.
she's, it's a very small side story, but her story just broke my heart, because she was like, I didn't know anything about disabled people before my accident. And after my accident, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed that I was in a wheelchair, right? And she's like, and so the idea of the rights for the disabled never meant anything to me until my editor said, I want you to cover this story. And she's like, and I showed up, and she's like, and here are all these people in wheelchairs who are like marching on Washington, talking
Blocking
about
the
their
streets.
rights, right? And she was like, and I at first was like, what is this? And she was like, but I was one of them, and I didn't even consider myself one of them. And you just go, what a weird, unlike any other civil rights movement. Like you're born a color, right? And you, even if you're not out of the closet, you are aware that you might be gay or trans, right? But being handicapped is a thing that could just happen to you. You don't have to be born that way. And it's so interesting, the people who come into this movement that we hear from, who were not that way from birth, because their observations about it are tenuous. They're very different. And it's very interesting. That one woman talks about, if I'm sitting down, I can put my cane underneath the couch and no one knows. Right? And you go, literally, if you think about people who have mixed race parents, they're passing, right? Their passing is not handicapped. Yet,
Sure.
Judy pulls them out of the shadows too and says, "No, you're a part of our movement." And like, I don't know, there's so
and all
many
they're fighting-
different shades of this that are so interesting to me.
And all they're fighting for is just to feel normal, right? Is to be able to walk up the stairs or get into a building or go to the bathroom in the right way without being uncomfortable. And a lot of this, they all start graduating college and they move to Berkeley and they're deadheads and hippies and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And they start this revolution. But it's really more about self-respect, right? It's you need to respect yourself before people are going to respect you. And they talk about, as a disabled person, if you aren't a passive person, you're screwed. You have to have a sense of humor about this. You have to be able to speak to it or whatever. Otherwise, you're going to be one of those people in Willowbrook who is getting denied basic human rights.
You'll just be taken advantage of.
Yeah, and to be fair, like, the ask that they're asking infrastructurally is a pretty huge ask. Like, you're asking to change all these buildings, all sorts of stuff. Like, it's a ton of work.
Yeah, it's a ton of money. I mean, it definitely is.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and of course you have lobbyists and stuff trying to block funding for this, and the 504 law of just building ramps, but it's their Civil Rights Act, right? And I love that once they start protesting and sitting, and Judy keeps pushing for one more day, and all of this stuff that they learned on how to protest and get by on this is what they learned from camp, and all the Black Panthers are bringing them food because they see them as equals.
Dude, the Black Panthers show up,
Amazing.
man. Like, that is the coolest shit ever. Well, and you're totally right. Like, it becomes camp again, and they refer to it as the 504 protest. And I love this moment. What's her name? She's just the cutest. Anne. Anne's the one. She's wheelchair bound and she's smaller, and she's the one who talked about when she was a kid going to camp and being like, "This is my Woodstock. I couldn't go to Woodstock, so this is Woodstock." And she says, I asked Judy, like, what's happening? And she said, "Bring a toothbrush." Right? Like, so badass that was the communication, was like, we might be here for a while. Now, peppered in along with this main story, peppered in along with the arc of the 504 protest, are these little smaller stories about how these other members of the camp were being were dealing with the outside world and then finding how they were going to be self-actualized within it. Two of my favorites I just want to touch on. My first is Denise's gonorrhea story. This is like, it's half and half. Half of it is funny and half of it is so fucked up and therefore so empowering, which is basically that she talks about got a job, decided to sleep with the bus driver because she's like, I ain't getting any younger, which I love that reaction of like, well, I want to have an affair. Come on. Like,
I don't want to die a virgin.
Yeah, I don't want to die a virgin. I'm in my 20s. Like, I want to have some fun. Then is starting to have pain in her lower half, goes into the hospital. They do an appendectomy on her and pull out a perfectly healthy appendix. And they're like, oh, your appendix didn't burst. And then her doctor's like, I want to do a pelvic exam. And is like, you have gonorrhea. She's like, at first I was kind of like, bragging rights. I got an STD. And then she goes, and then it occurred to me, I got unnecessary surgery because the doctor and the surgeons looked at me and said, who would want to fuck that? Mm-hmm. And she's like, and so I went back to school and I became a sex therapist because fuck them, right? Like, because this is important. And I was like, wow, what a roller coaster that whole story and how sad it got. And then the empowering response that she had to it, which was, people, the average Joe assumes that people that look like me don't have sex. So I'm going to become a sex therapist. And she wrote a bunch of books, right? About it's so cool. It's so empowering. So that's one side of it. Like,
this was truly a team effort too, right? With a wide range of people with disabilities, the unexpected, but they're unexpectedly hard-nosed activists, right?
Totally.
Judy has this emotional, historic moment where this I think it's a governor or somebody is just kind of shaking his head along with her as she's pleading and almost crying about her experience. And she's like, I would like it if you would stop shaking your head like you agree with me, because you obviously do not. And just gets into his face. And the
Yeah.
roar of the crowd like makes your heart swell.
Because
and,
she's like, you have
ugh.
no idea what I'm talking about. Stop
Yeah.
nodding your head like you know what I'm talking about.
And
You
they're on
don't.
what I think they were in that building for 23 days.
God.
And there's obviously a huge celebration and everything.
Now I want to throw this out. This is my other wonderfully peppered in moment that I underlined and was like maybe one of my favorite parts of the entire movie. Steve, who I talked about earlier, Steve, who was able to translate Nancy. He does this amazing gay striptease to Rocky Horror Picture Show, and it is punk as fuck. It is like, to me, I'm so glad that moment was added into this documentary, because like all the political aspects of this are super important, and like them changing the world in that way is super important. But like gay punk striptease cabaret is just as important of an actualization of who these people were able to find out
within themselves. Yeah.
Within themselves. Like that was, I loved it so much because it's sexy and it's funny and it's funky and it's punk. And yet it also still shows that like we can look back to him with his floppy hair as like the outsider kid at the Crip camp being like very serious, and then seeing him there doing that to Rocky Horror Picture Show like sweet transvestite, and I was like, it's sexy and funny and cool, and he is owning that moment as a man who's like wants to show off his G-string with cerebral palsy. And I was like, I loved it so much. I was like, I'm so glad that's here too, to show that sexuality, to show that funny like funkiness, and like to be like, and then to meet his daughter later on. I mean, he died early, and so we don't get him later on in the later years
interviewed in the
but
the
his
doc,
daughter's like, she's like, he didn't show all that to me. I knew it was there. I knew his like punk rebellion self was there, but like he was my dad, so he didn't show all that to me, but I still got it. And she has like purple hair and shit and like piercings, and so you're like, oh, she definitely got it. But like, I don't know, like that to me is just as important in showing these people as self-actualized, like fully formed people, personalities, right?
Yeah.
Like I loved that. I like that made me so happy to see that moment in there, because I was like, where the hell else are you going to see that footage, right?
No doubt, it's a unique, inspiring thing about a movement that you don't think about when you see an automatic door there, open with the wheelchair sign, and you push the button. You never think about how that got there, right? And Judy was a huge reason, and these people were a huge reason to get that ADA pass forward. They made this movie 30 years after the passing of that law, which is amazing. And
I cannot believe it took till 1990. Like that was the thing. Like that was making me so angry. That was breaking my brain so much. I'm like, I don't know. I guess in 1990 I didn't know anything about politics or about public policy. But like now watching it, I'm like, it just, I was playing with G.I. Joes. I didn't fucking know. I maybe kissed a girl. I don't know. But like it made me so mad to be like, really? That, I mean, fine, it takes a bunch of money to put in ramps and shit, but I'm like, that's how long? Like, as far as civil rights movements goes, like, that is so much longer. There's so much longer to fight to get. No, oh my God, it made me just furious.
And someone makes a point that you can have laws passed and that's great, but if people don't listen, how good is it? And this camp ended up going out of business in 1977, which still like it had the years that it did, but the fight continues is basically what what I want to hit on, and I'll end out the review with this story from Sundance. So when I was
please.
So when I was at the premiere at Sundance, it was at the Grand Theater in Salt Lake City, and it was packed to the brim. It was the opening world premiere of this thing. You knew it was made by Netflix, but it just seemed like something that I had to see in person, and I wanted to witness myself. So I always like to get pretty up close, and I was about 2 or 3 rows back. And, they begin the whole thing, and people come out, and they realize that, and we didn't realize this until afterwards, but they came out and realized that the closed captioning wasn't working for like half of the audience. And obviously the audience is full of people with disabled, and Sundance came out and tried to correct it and apologize and did all this, but it's just proof like this is happening. And this stupid ass white lady next to me, there was a bunch of the cast and members of the cast, and their family and people helping them along if they had a disability or whatever. And one of the main people was up front, kind of asking what they're saying because I couldn't hear whatever, and the stupid ass white lady next to me was like, "Can you tell them to be quiet? I'm trying to listen to the Q&A." And the girl snapped back and said, "She's part of this movie," and just like screamed at this lady, and this lady, rightfully so, just went like pretended like nothing happened. But it was a huge example to me of,
was it the yak lady?
No, it wasn't the yak lady. But this was a huge example to me that people still struggle with this daily. Just in this documentary, just going to a movie about them, about their disabilities, and how how they're mistreated, and proof of multiple things happening within this 2-hour time period of doing this. So the Q&A was amazing. Denise was hilarious. Like all of this, the whole experience was an emotional roller coaster, to be honest, because the documentary is great. You see it and you get inspired. You see all these people. You're in the room with them.
Oh, if I could have seen those people, I mean, after I watched it the other night, if I could have been like, now walk into this room and here's Denise and here's Jim, I would have started bawling. I know I would have. It would have been
amazing,
too much.
but also a reality check at the same time. So highly recommend this documentary if you have time to see it. It is on Netflix, so you can go and watch it there. And it's kind of funny when I talked about this with you and Sean recapping Sundance, you guys kept getting like, "Whoa, Crip Camp, are you supposed to say Crip?"
I totally was, but when you watch the movie, you're like, "Oh, that's what they called it." Like that, this was their name for it.
Well, I'm glad you were so you had such a good response to it. I knew you would get wrapped up in all of the stories.
My last, I definitely was, and my last thoughts on it are, one of my favorite mirror images, thinking about Jim when he's a little boy, first going to camp and feeling so awkward and weird. And then the mirror image of that is this, one of the last scenes in the movie is this Capitol crawl. This footage they do.
My God.
And it is.
I meant to mention that.
It is so heavy.
Powerful.
Where basically you have all of these disabled people leaving their chairs, leaving their crutches, and climbing the steps of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. to make a point.
Is there any better example?
There isn't. And there's a little boy who kind of almost even looks like a little boy version of Jim. And he's got sweat pouring down his head, and he's doing this, and he says as loud as he can, "I could do this all day!" Right? And you just go, how empowered. Like, and this is even before the ADA has passed, but that he feels so seen, right? That he can shout that out where you go, Jim at that age, at 10 or 11, wouldn't feel that way. He'd be embarrassed. He would. So you're like, even though maybe the authority wise, the legislative wise, like it wasn't there by 1990, as far as the social way, so much of it was there where these kids felt so much more comfortable in their own skin, which is so important. The last thing I just want to say is just that this movie, to me, uncovered this whole world, this whole community and struggle that I feel like most people, definitely myself, knew nothing about, When I would see that door with the wheelchair accessibility sign, I'm like, oh, somebody someday made a decision to do a thing, and that's why this exists. And I
Yeah,
can push
like I
that
said, you don't
button
think
and it
about it.
opens if I've got a big trailer full of stuff I got to carry into a place. But the fact that that sign and that push button thing has behind it this 60s, 70s groovy hippie punk fucking like we sat in this place and the Black Panthers had to bring us like beans and rice is so fucking badass. And it's so powerful and it's affirming.
It's empowering. Yeah.
It's so empowering. And I'm bummed that this didn't come out 20 years ago. Like I'm so glad it exists today, but I had no idea.
And that's why we do this. This is why we do Deep Dive Film School.
Yep.
I'm glad you love the movie so much. Next week, we're going to get into the 2016 film Life Animated about Owen Susskind, an autistic kid who loves Disney. Excited to get into that one.
Bring some Kleenex.
Yeah, definitely. Please play along, like and subscribe if you like what we do. We're trying to grow this channel. Really appreciate everyone out there, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, you guys.